Hello, viewers. Welcome back to a very special Memorial Day edition of Graham Bradley Reads. Here in the United States, we have a few dates on the calendar that are dedicated to the military. Memorial Day is for those who served and died. I believe the Canadian version is Remembrance Day. Veterans Day is for those who served and are still alive. And then we've got Armed Forces Day for those who are currently serving. We have a lot of wars in our relatively short history. For example, the country was born in the Revolution against Britain in the 1770s, and then in 1812 we had a sequel to that war. Expansion brought us to war with Mexico in the 1840s, and secession brought us to war with ourselves in the 1860s. A dwindling empire in Europe gave us a war with Spain in the 1890s, and then we joined up with everyone for a great war in the 1910s. And apparently that was so much fun that we decided to do it again, only bigger, in the 1940s. After that, well, certain factions were kind of expecting a third world war to break out. We put our boots on the ground in Korea, and fortunately it didn't turn into a third world war, but technically that war is still going on today. Vietnam in the 60s, and then in the 80s you had Panama, in the 90s you had Kuwait, and in the early 2000s, Afghanistan and Iraq, which are still going on. And that's all just to name a few. There was even a big chunk of that where we were giving side eyes to Russia. That lasted for decades. The how and the why of a war is something that we must each grapple with individually, and that's not the point of this video. With Memorial Day coming up, I've been thinking and reflecting on the wars that established and defended this country. And more important, the soldiers who died in them, never getting to see the results of their sacrifice. And since this is a reading channel, this never hit home harder than it did for me after reading Flags of Our Fathers by James Bradley and Ron Powers. To my knowledge, I don't have any relation to this Mr. Bradley. He's from Wisconsin, and my Bradley ancestors are from coal country in Virginia, so who knows. In a sense, it is a family story for James. It focuses on the World War II experiences of his father, John. In a larger sense, this book is about this picture right here, the raising of the flag on Iwo Jima. Doubtless you've seen it before, or statues of it, and while it's impressive and inspiring, the story behind this picture is rather tragic. Allow me to frame this for you. John Bradley fought in the Pacific Theater of World War II. He was a sailor with the Navy. He hopped islands with the Allies against Imperial Japan. These tiny little rocks in the ocean were tactically valuable, and the island of Iwo Jima was critical due to its location. It was right between the Allies and the Empire, and whoever possessed it would have a much easier time launching bombers against the other side. At the start of this conflict, the Japanese held it, and the Allies decided they wanted to have it. So they stormed Iwo Jima and sustained a casualty rate well over 60%. For every 3 men that stepped on the island, 2 died. These are not casualty levels that we would find even remotely palatable in modern warfare. And I say modern because we're 80 years removed from this. This was all for a chunk of land just a few miles long. The fighting was extremely brutal, and the Japanese were deadly fighters that didn't have surrender in their vocabulary. What those Allied warriors saw would haunt them for the remainder of their lives. When the island was taken, a group of soldiers were ordered to fasten a U.S. flag to a pole and raise it up to signify their victory. They were 6 in all. 3 of them would later die on Iwo Jima. Their names were Harlon Block, Franklin Sousley, and Mike Strank. The other 3, the survivors, were initially identified as Ira Hayes, René Gagnon, and James Bradley. 3 men who were simply following orders to raise a flag, unaware of the photographs taken a few yards away, or how those photos made it to the papers back in the States. Most important of all, they were unaware of how those photos would be used and what they would mean for the rest of their lives. 20th century warfare is like a coin with 2 faces. Foreign combat is crucial on one side, but domestic propaganda is inseparable from it on the other. An entire genre of propaganda art was created in the Second World War, to say nothing of the role that television would play during Vietnam and Kuwait. That photo of the flag raising on Iwo Jima was a symbol of victory to a tired population back in the States. It was a critical boost to the American spirit, a taste of victory, and a promise that the boys overseas were getting the job done. All we had to do was keep supporting them. To the 3 men who survived Iwo Jima, though, it was a reminder of the most brutal experience of their lives, and for a long time, 3 of those men were incorrectly identified. More on that in a minute. For years, Bradley, Gagnon, and Hayes were constantly called up by the military to participate in parades, ceremonies, and fundraising functions. They had become the face of victory in the Pacific, and the homeland was proud of them. Somehow, James Bradley never knew about that until after his father died in 1994. And it turns out there was a huge reason why John Bradley never talked about what he went through. It was painful to dredge up, as one might imagine. And there's no way that I can do that entire story justice by trying to sum it all up in a video after having read a book about it. But there are some points I want to touch on here that will help you understand why this book moved me so much. I read it 2 years ago, and I still think about it every year when these armed forces holidays roll around. The facts are these. John Bradley would come home to Wisconsin from the war, marry his childhood sweetheart, and spend the next several decades as a mortician in his hometown. One assumes that his proximity to death in combat gave him valuable tools for helping people move through the grief of losing a loved one. He was given the Navy Cross for his services in 1945, which is just below the Medal of Honor in terms of magnitude. His family didn't know about it. They didn't even find it until after he died. Whenever anyone from the press called, which happened frequently throughout James Bradley's childhood, the Bradley children were instructed to tell them that John was off fishing and he couldn't be reached. John didn't talk about Iwo Jima in any detail to his wife or kids. As for René Gagnon, he came home to New Hampshire, and of the 3 survivors of that photo, he was the one who most expected a hero's life after the war. If I recall correctly, there's even a detail where he tried to apply for either a police or firefighter job despite having no experience, no training, and was very disappointed that he didn't get it because he'd kind of expected to just have doors open for him due to his popularity, due to his association with having been in that photo. The successes that he expected never materialized, and in addition to the despair associated with that, he also had marital problems. He would die of a heart attack while working as a janitor at a local school in 1979. But Ira Hayes had the most tragic story of these survivors, as his remaining years were plagued by poverty, gambling debts, and alcoholism. He would go on to be arrested something like 50 times for public intoxication in Arizona, where he lived on a Pima Indian reservation. Ira was a member of the Pima Nation, and if Gagnon thought that his post-war life was hard, he should have checked in with Hayes. However, Hayes played a crucial role in helping to correctly identify one of the men in the picture, namely Harlon Block, originally thought to be Henry Hansen. As this book consists of an interwoven narrative of the lives of all these men that were in the picture, I found Ira Hayes' story to be especially moving because not only did he not seek out any glory for himself after the war and after appearing in this photo, but he walked on foot or hitchhiked from Arizona to Texas to meet Harlon Block's mother to tell her, I know that your son was incorrectly overlooked in this photograph, and I can vouch for the fact that he was there, that he was in that picture, and have the record officially corrected. Harlon Block's mother insisted that Harlon was in the photo, but nobody believed her, not even her own husband. The role that Ira played in correcting the record is invaluable to the Block family. Any of you who are watching this and that are fans of Johnny Cash might be familiar with the Ballad of Ira Hayes. Yes, this is that man. In terms of correcting the record and identifying the soldiers and sailors in this picture, this is where the story takes an even more complicated turn. James Bradley wrote this book in the late 90s, and it was published in the year 2000. But in the year 2016, the U.S. military conducted another investigation into the photograph at Iwo Jima, and they determined that John Bradley wasn't actually in this photo. 3 years after that, in 2019, they would further amend the record to state that Gagnon wasn't in it either, but Hayes certainly was. The man thought to be John Bradley was Harold Schultz, while the man thought to be René Gagnon was mistaken for Harold Keller. In his book, James Bradley says the only proof that he got from his father was a letter that John wrote during the war, just a few days or weeks after the successes at Iwo Jima, saying that he had a little to do with the flag raising on the island and that it was one of the happiest moments of his life. But that could have been the first raising of the flag on Mount Suribachi. The photograph that we know so well today was the raising of a second, larger flag meant to replace the first. This replacement raising in the photograph, and the high likelihood of some imprecise record keeping, could have contributed to Gagnon and Bradley being misidentified on Suribachi that day. None of this, however, discredits their presence on the island, their contribution to the victory, or the horrors they saw along the way, which had everything to do with why John Bradley didn't talk openly about it, not even to his family. This book really made me reconsider how I think about Memorial Day, how I think about the wars that we fight as a country, why we fight them, who does the actual fighting, and what kind of life we give them when they come back. The real cost of war is measured in the lives of those who fight them. We, as citizens of the Republic, need to be aware of the power we have to elect leaders who keep those things in mind. Going all the way back to the Revolution, consider those who died to get this fledgling nation on its feet. They died to build something they never got to see, never got to live in, never got to enjoy. To paraphrase John Bradley, the real heroes are the guys who didn't come back. That's not just a trite phrase. I mean, I try to put myself in their boots, put myself there. Imagine being on a battlefield and understanding that you have an objective, that you've got to win. If you win, you get to go home and you get to keep living your life. If you die, that's it. That's the end. And we all hope that our lives mean something, that they matter in the end. And for those that die in the service of this country, they're the ones that we owe a debt to. And while it is a debt that can never exactly be repaid, my understanding, my feelings on it is that it's repaid in how we live our lives, how we take care of what they protected. Keep that in mind this Memorial Day, and if you're looking for a good book to read, I highly recommend Flags of Our Fathers. As a final note, I understand that Clint Eastwood produced a movie of this story, though I haven't yet watched it. He also made Letters from Iwo Jima, which shows that particular battle from the Japanese perspective. It's a companion film to Flags of Our Fathers. I'll be watching them this summer at some point, and I'll let you know what I think. If you've seen either one, drop a comment below. In the meantime, have a great weekend, and God bless America.